We all go through life thinking we know who we are, thinking we have some sense of control. But then something happens that shakes us to our core. It's like the ground beneath us disappears, and we're left free falling through the unknown, desperately reaching for something to grab onto. But there's nothing familiar, nothing comforting. This is what we call the dark night of the soul. For those of us who are called on a deeper spiritual path, this moment isn't just a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Every chosen one, every soul called to something higher, will face not one, but multiple dark nights of the soul. These are not punishments. They're not random acts of cruelty from the universe. They are spiritual initiations. Think of them as the universe's way of stripping away everything that isn't truly you, everything that is false, so you can emerge clear, powerful, and aligned with your higher purpose. But let me be clear, this process is painful. It's messy, it's confusing, and it's necessary.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
The first dark night usually comes when you've built your life around something, a belief, a career, a relationship, and then it all falls apart. You might ask, why is this happening to me? But the real question is, what is this trying to show me? It's in these moments where everything seems to be crumbling that we're forced to look deeper, to see the truth beneath the surface. You might find yourself questioning everything, your beliefs, your values, your purpose. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. In this first stage, you're being shown that the foundation you built your life on is shaky. Maybe you've been living according to someone else's rules. Maybe you've been chasing goals that aren't truly yours. Whatever it is, the universe is saying, wake up. It's showing you that you can't build your life on illusions. And that can feel terrifying. We cling to those old beliefs, those old ways of being, because they feel safe. But safety is not the same as truth. And when you're on this path, when you're called to something higher, the universe won't let you stay in your comfort zone for long. So what do? Most of us resist. We fight to hold on to the things that are slipping away. But the more we fight, the more painful it becomes. The lesson here is to let go, to surrender, not to give up, but to trust that what's falling apart wasn't meant to last. It's like trying to cling to a leaf in the wind. You can fight the wind all you want, but the leaf is going to be carried away regardless. You have to let it go and trust that something new, something better is coming. The second dark night comes when we start to realize that the identity we were so attached to isn't real. You might have spent years building up an image of who you think you are: a successful person, a good person, a spiritual person, but in this stage, even that identity starts to crumble. You begin to see that the person you thought you were is just a mask, a role you've been playing. And when that mask falls off, it can feel like you're losing yourself. But again, this is part of the process. The universe isn't trying to take away your identity to punish you. It's trying to show you that you are not your identity. You are something much deeper, much more expansive. In this stage, you might feel lost. You might feel like you don't know who you are anymore. And that's because the you that you thought you were is dissolving. What's left is the real you, the part of you that's always been there but has been buried under layers of conditioning, expectations, and false beliefs. The key here is to not rush the process. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also necessary. Let yourself be in that space of not knowing. Let yourself feel the discomfort of having the ground pulled out from under you. because it's in that space of uncertainty that the real you begins to emerge. The third dark night comes when we're faced with our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we've been avoiding, denying, or suppressing. This is when all the stuff we've tried to hide from ourselves comes bubbling to the surface. Old wounds, traumas, fears, they all come up for review. And it's not pretty. This is the stage where many people want to give up. It's too painful. It's too overwhelming. But the thing is, you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. You can't move forward until you face all the parts of yourself that you've been running from. This is where the real work begins. It's not about fixing yourself. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about accepting all parts of yourself, the light and the dark. It's about seeing the parts of yourself that you've judged, the parts of yourself that you've labeled as bad or wrong, and loving them anyway. Because those parts of you aren't going anywhere. They're part of who you are. And the more you try to push them away, the more they'll control you from the shadows. The only way to integrate your shadow is to bring it into the light. And that takes courage. It takes being willing to look at the parts of yourself that you've been afraid to see. Now, the fourth dark night is tricky. It's when we start to feel disconnected from everything. From the world, from the people we love, from ourselves. It's like we're floating in space with nothing to hold on to. This stage is often referred to as the void, and it can feel like the most isolating experience of all. You might feel like you're stuck in limbo, like you're not moving forward, but you're also not going back. It can feel like you're just existing, without any real sense of purpose or direction. But this stage is critical. It's where the real transformation happens. You see, the void isn't empty. It's full of potential. It's the space where the old you dies so the new you can be born. It's the space where you shed everything that isn't truly you, so you can step into your authentic self. But to do that, you have to let go of the need to know what's coming next. You have to let go of the need for certainty. Because in the void, there is no certainty. There is only trust. Trust that something new is emerging, even if you can't see it yet. The fifth and final dark night is the rebirth. This is where everything comes full circle. It's where you begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But here's the thing, you're not the same person who entered the tunnel. You've been through the fire. You've been stripped down to your core. And now you're emerging as something new. But this stage isn't about going back to the way things were. It's about stepping into a new way of being. It's about embracing your true self and living from that place of authenticity. This is where you start to see the gifts in everything you've been through. You start to understand why you had to go through the darkness, why you had to face your fears, why you had to let go of everything that wasn't real. And in that understanding, you find peace, you find clarity, you find purpose. You realize that the dark nights of the soul weren't there to break you, they were there to make you stronger, wiser, and more aligned with who you truly are. The rebirth of the chosen one, how the dark nights forge a new you. Now that you've been through the fire, you're standing in a new light. But the journey isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. This next stage is where you take everything you've learned, everything you've shed, and start to live from a place of true power. The rebirth after the dark nights isn't about returning to normal life. It's about stepping into something completely new. You've been through a process of purification. It's like being forged in the hottest fire, where everything that wasn't real, that wasn't truly you, has been burned away. Now, you stand not as the person who entered the dark night, but as someone transformed, someone who has let go of all the false layers. You're raw, real, and more aligned with your true self than ever before. But here's the thing, this isn't the moment where everything magically falls into place. This is where the real work begins. The rebirth is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of a new path. And on this path, you have to learn how to live as this new version of yourself. You've let go of so much during the dark night's identities, beliefs, relationships. Now, you have to figure out how to move forward without all the things you once thought defined you. This isn't easy. There's a part of you that might want to go back to the familiar, to the way things used to be. But that's not possible anymore. You've outgrown your old life, and there's no going back. It's like trying to wear clothes that no longer fit. You can't squeeze yourself back into the old version of you, because that version doesn't exist anymore. The only way is forward, and that requires courage. It requires trusting that this new version of you, the one that's emerged from the ashes, is enough. And here's the reality: after each dark night, there's a period of confusion. You might feel like you have no idea who you are now, what you want, or where you're going. That's normal. When you've shed so many layers, it takes time to reconnect with yourself on a deeper level. It's not about rushing to figure it out. It's about allowing yourself to be in this new space, to explore it, to feel it out. You have to give yourself permission to not have all the answers, to not know exactly what comes next. Because when you try to force clarity, you're still operating from the old mindset of control. And that's what the dark nights were trying to teach you: to let go of control and trust the process. In this phase, you might feel a deep sense of emptiness, but it's not the same kind of emptiness that you felt during the dark nights. This is a space of potential. It's a blank canvas. You've wiped away everything that wasn't truly you, and now you get to decide how you want to fill this new space. It's like you've been given a second chance to create the life you truly want, but this time, you're creating from a place of authenticity, not from a place of fear or societal expectations. This is one of the most powerful parts of the spiritual journey, but it's also one of the most challenging because it requires you to face the truth of who you are now. And sometimes, that truth isn't what you expected. Maybe you realize that the things you thought you wanted no longer hold meaning for you. Maybe the goals you were chasing no longer resonate with your soul. This can be disorienting because you've spent so much time, energy, and effort striving for things that no longer feel aligned. But this is where the magic happens. This is where you get to rewrite your story. You get to let go of the old script and create something entirely new. The key here is patience. You're not going to have it all figured out right away. And that's okay. You've just been through a deep transformation, and it takes time to integrate everything you've learned. It takes time to fully step into this new version of yourself. There will be moments where you feel lost, moments where you question everything again. But this time you'll handle it differently. This time you'll approach it with a deeper sense of trust. You'll know that even though you don't have all the answers, you're on the right path. You'll know that clarity will come in its own time, and you don't need to rush it. As you move forward, you'll notice that your priorities start to shift. The things that used to matter to you might no longer hold the same weight. This is because you've changed on a fundamental level. You're no longer driven by the same desires, the same fears. You're operating from a higher level of awareness now, and that changes everything. You start to see life differently. You start to realize what really matters. Relationships that once felt essential might fall away, not because of conflict, but because they no longer resonate with who you are now. And that's okay. Letting go of old connections, even ones that were once close, is a natural part of the process. You might also find yourself drawn to new things, new people, new experiences. This is a sign that you're aligning with your higher self. You're no longer chasing things that don't resonate with your soul. Instead, you're being guided toward what's truly aligned with your purpose. But this process isn't always glamorous. It can feel lonely at times. You might feel like you're walking a path that no one else understands. And in a way, that's true. Your path is unique to you. No one else is going to fully understand what you've been through or where you're going. But that's the beauty of it. Your journey is your own, and it's leading you exactly where you're meant to be. As you continue on this path, you'll start to notice a shift in your energy. You'll feel lighter, freer, more expansive. This is because you've let go of so much baggage. You've released the things that were weighing you down, and now you have space to breathe, to grow, to expand. You're no longer operating from a place of fear or scarcity. Instead, you're moving from a place of love and abundance. You're no longer trying to control everything. You're allowing life to unfold in its own way, and that creates a sense of peace that you've never felt before. This is what rebirth is all about. It's not about becoming something new. It's about uncovering who you've always been. It's about reconnecting with the truth of who you are, without all the layers of conditioning, fear, and doubt. And when you do that, life starts to flow in ways you never imagined. You become a magnet for the things that are truly meant for you. Opportunities, relationships, and experiences that are aligned with your highest good start to come into your life effortlessly. You no longer have to chase after them. They come to you because you're in alignment with your true self. But here's the thing: this process never really ends. The spiritual journey is a continuous cycle of death and rebirth. You'll go through more dark nights. You'll face more challenges. But each time you'll emerge stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your purpose. And that's the beauty of it. You're constantly evolving, constantly shedding the old and stepping into the new. It's a never-ending process of becoming more of who you truly are. The eternal cycle of death and rebirth, how every dark night leads to a higher version of yourself. You've been through the fire, you've emerged stronger, but the journey doesn't stop here. Each dark night is a gateway to a higher version of yourself. The question isn't whether you'll face more challenges, but how you will handle them when they come. What you do with each dark night determines how high you rise. You've been through the hardest parts, but here's something most people don't realize: the cycle of death and rebirth never really ends. It's not a one-time event. It's not a single dark night of the soul that transforms you forever. It's a process. One that repeats itself over and over again, each time taking you deeper into yourself, each time stripping away another layer of what isn't true, what isn't real. And every time you think you've made it, that you've crossed the finish line, something else will emerge. Another challenge. Another dark night. But here's the difference: each time you go through it, you're a little more prepared. You've gained wisdom from the last time. You've learned how to let go, how to face the unknown, how to trust in the process. And so, while the pain might still be there, While the uncertainty might still be there, it doesn't have the same grip on you. You know that on the other side of the darkness there's light. You've seen it before, and you'll see it again. But here's the thing, every dark night gets deeper. The first one might shake up your career, your relationships, the external parts of your life. The next one digs into your identity, your ego, the stories you've told yourself about who you are. And then, as you go deeper, it starts to touch on your very essence. What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to truly exist, beyond the labels, beyond the roles, beyond even the self that you've been so attached to? This is where things get really intense, because it's not just about letting go of things outside of you anymore. Now, you're being asked to let go of the very idea of who you think you are, and that can feel like dying. It can feel like you're being erased. But this isn't an erasure, it's a return. It's a return to what's real, to what's always been there, underneath all the layers of conditioning, fear, and ego. Think of it like this: each dark night is a death, but not in the way we usually think of death. It's not the end. It's a transformation. It's like a snake shedding its skin. The old skin has to go, but the snake itself is still very much alive, more alive than ever, because it's now free of the tight, restrictive skin that was holding it back. That's what the dark night does for us. It frees us from the old layers we've outgrown, from the parts of ourselves that no longer fit. But here's the paradox: the deeper you go, the less there is to hold on to. The more layers you shed, the more you realize that there's nothing to grasp. There's no solid ground, no permanent identity, no fixed self. And that can feel terrifying at first. But it's also incredibly liberating, because when you stop trying to hold on to something that doesn't exist, you start to experience true freedom. This is the ultimate lesson of the dark night of the soul. It's not about finding something new to cling to. It's about realizing that you don't need to cling to anything at all. You don't need to define yourself. You don't need to control your life. You don't need to have all the answers. You can just be. And in that being, in that space of total openness and trust, everything you need comes to you. Not because you're chasing it, not because you're forcing it, but because you're in alignment with the flow of life itself. But that's the thing, this flow isn't something you can control. And that's what the dark night keeps teaching you. Every time you try to control, every time you try to resist, life will push back. It will show you again and again that control is an illusion, that resistance only creates suffering, and that the only way to truly live, to truly be free, is to surrender to the flow. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean being passive. It means being active in a different way. It means listening to life rather than trying to dictate how it should be. It means responding to what's happening right now, rather than reacting out of fear of what might happen in the future. It means trusting that you don't need to have all the answers, because life itself is guiding you, moment by moment. Each dark night strips away another layer of resistance, another layer of control. And as painful as that process is, it's also what sets you free. Because once you stop resisting, once you stop trying to control everything, you start to see life in a new way. You start to experience a deeper level of peace, a deeper level of joy, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer fighting against the natural flow of life. This is the real gift of the dark night of the soul. It's not about achieving some spiritual milestone. It's not about becoming enlightened or reaching some final destination. It's about learning how to live in the present moment, fully and completely, without needing to grasp, without needing to know, without needing to control. Does that mean the challenges stop? No. Life will still throw you curveballs. You'll still face difficulties, but the way you respond to them will change. Instead of reacting from a place of fear or resistance, you'll respond from a place of openness, from a place of trust. You'll know, deep down, that no matter what happens, you're okay. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you've learned to let go of the need to figure it all out. And that's the ultimate freedom. It's not about escaping the challenges of life. It's about learning how to move through them with grace, with trust, with a sense of inner peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. This is what the dark night of the soul teaches us. It's a brutal, messy, and often painful process. But it's also one of the most profound experiences we can go through, because it strips away everything that isn't real. It forces us to face our fears, to confront our shadows, to let go of our illusions. And in doing so, it brings us back to what's real. It brings us back to the truth of who we are, beyond the stories, beyond the labels, beyond the ego. And once you've tasted that truth, once you've experienced that level of freedom, you can never go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've come to know. And that's the beauty of it. Life will keep challenging you, keep pushing you, keep stripping away the layers. But each time you'll come out the other side a little more free, a little more open, a little more open, a little more aligned with the truth of who you are. And that's why, despite the pain, despite the darkness, the dark night of the soul is a gift. Because it's through that darkness that we find the light. It's through that suffering that we find our strength. It's through letting go that we find our freedom. Living beyond the illusion how the dark nights prepare you for true freedom. You've survived the darkest parts, but now you're faced with the real work. How do you live in this world, knowing what you know, seeing what you've seen? How do you move forward when you realize that everything you thought was solid is, in fact, just another illusion? This is where the next phase begins. Now that you've been through the fire, the question isn't, how do I avoid more dark nights, because you know they'll come again. The real question is, how do I live now, knowing the truth? The truth that control is an illusion, that we're not defined by our roles, our achievements, or even our failures. You've seen how life strips away everything false, leaving only what's real. So how do you live in a world that's full of distractions, full of illusions, full of things pulling you back into the old way of being? The key is simple. You live with awareness. You live with the understanding that nothing outside of you defines your worth. You no longer seek validation from achievements, relationships, or external success. You stop chasing and instead you start being. You allow life to flow through you rather than trying to control its every movement. And when challenges come, as they always will, you face them not with resistance but with acceptance. You know that every difficulty, every dark night is simply another opportunity to shed more layers, to come closer to your true self. In this place of awareness, life becomes less about doing and more about being. You still take action, you still set goals, but you're no longer attached to the outcomes. You know that whatever happens is part of the process, part of your growth. You move through life with a sense of peace, not because everything is easy, but because you've learned not to cling. You've learned that true freedom comes from letting go again and again. So what's next? You live fully. You embrace every moment, every challenge, every joy, with the understanding that it's all part of the dance. Each dark night is just another step, guiding you deeper into yourself, closer to the truth. And in that truth, you find the peace and freedom that nothing in the outside world could ever give you. That's the gift of the dark night of the soul. It brings you back home to yourself.